the news today that some of the dollars that have been appropriated for a bailout package would be used to consolidate, help banks consolidate, have strong banks buy out weaker banks. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, and what do we need to watch out for?
Well, it's probably a reasonable policy because you have a lot of basically bankrupt banks that, if they weren't consolidated, the FDIC would have to take them over. And I'm really not anxious to have the FDIC running most of the nation's banks. So if you could have the weaker banks consolidate with stronger banks, that's probably a good thing. But what you don't want to have happen is then have a small number of really large banks going unregulated, because you get the sort of problems that we have now. So that sort of consolidation of the banking industry has to go along with a commitment to stronger regulation.
On the point of stronger regulation, what are you doing right now, and what is your U.S. action going to be doing to push that issue?
What we're going to be doing is immediately after the election, we're going to be hoping that a lot of the groups that work with us during the 2-week period around the initial Bush-Paulson bailout fight, to bring them together to really start mobilizing the grassroots, calling for specifically what we want to see in terms of regulations.
Okay. The House Banking Committee yesterday, Fed Chairman Bernanke said that he would support a second stimulus package. Is that good news, bad news? What should we be watching out for with what Bernanke said?
Well, it's good news. It shows that at least our Fed chair isn't completely out of touch with reality about the economy. I mean, the economy's going down really fast, and you do need something to boost it. What happened was we had lots of problems, obviously stemming from the housing crash. Those problems were exacerbated by President Bush and others really deliberately trying to provoke panic in order to get their bailout bill through Congress, talking about the Great Depression. I've never heard a president imply that his policies might bring on a Great Depression before. So you have a lot of people who've basically changed their habits. They've given up spending money, put off vacations, new cars, other purchases like that, and they're saving, because they're very, very scared. Now, they did have to shift from consumption to saving because people lost, hundreds of thousands of equity in their home in many cases. But it would have been good if that didn't take place all at once. Now, to counteract that loss in demand, you'll need government stimulus. There is no other way to keep employment reasonably high and to keep the economy from just falling off a cliff. So it's good that Bernanke recognizes that. It would have been nice if he had mentioned numbers, because it should be a really big number. I've been saying 300 or 400 billion. Barry Eichenwalder is a very well-respected mainstream economist in Berkeley, said 700 billion. So we need a lot of money, and it's spent as stimulus, and it's good to know that the Fed chair at least recognizes that.
A couple of people at the House Budget Committee hearing in fact said that one of the economists from Brookings, in fact, said that there ought to be a $300 billion package. Is that what is that the scale of what your organization is looking for and will be asking Congress for?
That's a number that we are definitely going to be putting out there far and wide, and going to be encouraging folks at the grassroots to specifically talk about. I think looking at the comments that Dean just made, I think it's quite clear that it's going to take government investment to begin to turn this economy around, and a stimulus package, which we like to call an economic recovery package, in the amount of a minimum $300 billion is going to be necessary. But it's going to need to have several things. It needs to make sure, Congress needs to make sure that it includes extension of unemployment insurance, particularly 13 weeks for all states. In addition, aid to state and local governments to prevent any further cuts and address some of the public services issues such as healthcare, et cetera. In addition to investments in infrastructure, our depleted infrastructure, and to hopefully move us towards investing in those clean energy jobs. In addition to a temporary increase in the food stamp program, with the high cost of food right now, you have a lot of low-income people right now who are suffering tremendously. And then I think it's also going to be important to make sure that the issue of the foreclosure is addressed in that package as well. Now, whether that's $300 billion, I'm not quite sure, but that at minimum should be included in the package.
Finally, what's the most important thing that we need to be doing right now as activists over the next few weeks? What do you guys think?
I think over the next couple of weeks, I think what we have to do is clearly talk about the impact that this economic crisis has been having on Main Street America, particularly those who've been hit the hardest, over the Bush policies, get a sense from those elected officials how they are going to be addressing this particular issue, and then immediately after the election, mobilize those same people to basically tell the newly elected, this is exactly what we want, this is what we want you to go to Washington, D.C. to work in.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that. I mean, we have to keep this in public view, and we have to. This really has changed the world. I mean, the policies that were pursued over, the last 8 years, arguably longer than that, clearly have blown up in the faces of the people pursuing it. We really have to hold those people responsible. I mean, it's everyone likes to talk about accountability. Let's see some. People made some really big mistakes. The whole country is paying for those mistakes. We should make sure that the people who were responsible pay the price.
Thank you very much.